Brandon Tatum Show is on KTAR News 92.3 FM.
Yes, you heard that correctly. You're not having a nightmare. This is a dream come true. Yours truly, Brandon Tatum. I have my own show. I don't know what KTR was thinking when they gave me my show. I'm probably about to tear this place up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm so excited. First of all, I got to thank God for blessing me with this show, and I thank everybody that's tuning in. If you're driving in your car, make sure you have your seatbelt on and you're listening. I want to thank everybody that's joining from the social media platforms that I have. This is going to be a great experience. I want to be a laid-back person that when you ride in the car, hanging out at home, you can listen to, you can get good feedback from, you can get good knowledge, and a balanced perspective. I'm an everyday person, and I like to tell the truth and keep things clean and good, so you don't have nothing to worry about. But for those of you who have not heard of me, don't know who I am, wondering why you're hearing this beautiful voice on the radio for the first time, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about who I am, where I come from, and kind of the focus of what I want to accomplish, on this show. So I was born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas. Shout out to everybody that's from Texas. I love my Arizonas, but I'm from Texas. Don't get it twisted. But I'm born and raised Fort Worth, Texas. My parents were separated when I was born, or not when I was born, but when I was a very young kid. Interestingly enough, my dad didn't have his dad around. My mom didn't have her mom around. And my mom, dropped out of school in the 8th grade. My grandmother had my mother when she was 12 years old. And so some people would believe or have in their mind that I was destined to fail. I was destined for me not to accomplish some of the things that I have, but I think God had a different plan. But I'll never forget the pivotal moment in my life when I was 8 years old, when my dad, I got arrested for smoking marijuana in a vacant house. And I remember, and I don't know about you, but my dad used to carry that belt everywhere we go. And you cut up, you're going to get it. That's all you need to know. You're going to get it. And, after that experience or the situation that happened, I thought I was going to get a beat down in my life. But it didn't go that way. My dad strategically used something that was in my heart, my love and passion for basketball at the time, to really turn me in a different direction. But I think it's meaningful to tell a little bit about that story. So, I had older cousins who they were in drugs and different things like that, and we were hanging out with them, and we kind of got caught up in a situation. I'll never forget when we went to the juvenile detention center in Fort Worth, Texas. We thought that their parents were going to show up and we were going to act like it never happened and go on and never tell my dad about it. But lo and behold, they called Mr. Tatum, and he came in there like he was Hulk Hogan. He said he was going to kill us and everything. And I remember looking at my brother saying, man, I hope they just leave us in here, because my dad don't seem like he's playing around today. But the beautiful thing about the story is that when we got in the car, my dad looked at me and he said, look, Brandon, if you don't change your ways, you don't act with integrity, you will never play in the NBA. And I think that really struck a chord in me. From that point on, I began to really take a passion to play football and to be an athlete and really be successful in school. So we can fast forward to high school. I went to Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School. For those of you who were born and raised in Fort Worth, or you know what I'm talking about, I went to Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School, which was a pretty rough school. We were great at athletics, but the educational side of it wasn't as great, and the violence was tremendous at times. I mean, we had people pulling guns on each other in the parking lot, shooting dice in the bathroom. But there was a pathway to success there, and I'll save that for another segment. But I played football there. I was an All-American. I was the top player in the nation. I had a scholarship to almost every university I could think of. And I decided to go to the University of Arizona in Tucson. Shout out to my Arizona Wildcats, bear down, even though they're looking kind of trash this year. But it's just the first game of the season, so I hope they turn it around. But I played football. It didn't work out for me there. I had great hopes of playing in NFL, and because of my attitude at the time and certain circumstances, I never got the playing time that I wanted. And I was in the 2010 NFL draft. It was very heartbreaking for me that I did not get drafted. But again, I think that God had a better plan for me. So after that, I met a gentleman, and I won't say his name on air unless he, wanted me to, but he was a millionaire, and he mentored me for a short period of time. when I had my son. And what he told me was that I need to put an X on the calendar for football and give it my best shot. And if it doesn't work out, I need to transition to something different. And that's exactly what I did. Football wasn't working out, and I applied for every job in the city of Tucson. And just so happened the Tucson police was one of the options that I had, and they called me back. And the day that they called me will be memorable. Some people probably think it's funny. Some people probably think it's ridiculous. But I would never forget the day. It was my son's mom at the time. We were arguing over the phone, nothing major. And then the next morning, I get a phone call from the police department. And it's like, hey, this is the Tucson Police Department. And I could only think in my mind, like, I can't believe she called the police on me, for a simple argument over the phone. That it's kind of drastic. And so I could tell they figured out that I was kind of apprehensive in my voice. And they said, hey, you applied for the city of Tucson Police Department. Do you still want the job? And I said, yeah, I want the job. But I didn't know anything about policing. My only experience was getting arrested at 8 years old. And so from that point moving forward, I said, hey, I need to do a ride along. And I did a ride along with Officer Sean Payne, whom I will never forget. He was probably one of the greatest men that I've ever met. And we did a ride along, and it just blew my mind. Policing blew my mind. And I could tell you this, we went from changing a flat tire from elderly, with the elderly lady on the side of the road, to going lights and sirens, code 3, to a gentleman who was trying to attempt to kill himself. He was actively cutting his wrist in the back room. And I remember Sean was driving. We could have been going about 75 miles per hour on a regular road. I mean, we almost died probably 3 times because people don't know how to move to the right. So if the sirens are going on, please move to the right. Do not make us have to go around you. So we go and we get to the call, and they let me walk up with him. They went to kick the door in to check welfare on the gentleman, and he was actively cutting his wrist. I could see once they went in, they let me come and look, and he was cutting his wrist. And, Sean saved his life, man. And just the adrenaline rush from all of that just made me wonder, like, dude, how do you do this every day? And he said, man, I do this every day consistently. And I felt in myself that this was something I really wanted to do. This is something that I feel that God is gearing me towards, and I have to be this guy. I have to be a hero like Sean Payne. And I joined the police department. I did just about everything on the Tucson Police Department. I was there for about 6.5 years. I was a spokesperson for the police department of PIO. I was on the SWAT team for about a year. I trained new officers as a field training officer. I was a general instructor at the academy. And that experience really set me up for success. And just with my first show, I'm already realizing that I could talk. So I'm running out of time. So I'm gonna try to wrap this up real quick, and maybe I'll touch base a little bit on the next segment about it, because I really think it's important for people to understand who I am and why you should probably listen to me, maybe find some common ground with what I'm saying. But after that, I became a police officer. I love what I did every single day. And that kind of got me into the political world. I wasn't really into politics per se. I never really voted. It's shameful to say that, but it's true. I never really voted at all. But once I started paying them taxes, I realized that I probably need to get politically active. A little $23 an hour sound good to me until I had to pay those taxes. But we're getting ready to go to break. Thank you guys for joining thus far. Make sure you come back for the next segment. I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that I said before, but we're going to talk about Antonio Brown. I want to know what y'all think about what Antonio Brown did. You're listening to the Brandon Tatum Show on KTAR.
Brandon Tatum, KTAR News, 92.3 FM.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? We are back, and like I promised you, we're going to talk about Antonio Brown. I think I'm going to skip out on giving all my background. I mean, you guys can hear that another time. But this story is very interesting to me when it comes to Antonio Brown obviously getting cut by the Oakland Raiders today. I just don't know what he's thinking, and also in my mind, it's like, did he really lose First of all, if you don't know, he had a $30 million guaranteed contract. $30 million. And he would have made about $50 million over the three-year contract, I believe. That's a lot of money. And it seems as if his contention or his problems were related to a helmet. A helmet. Now, I understand. Look, I play football. You know, when you look good, you play good. I understand that. I felt that. But when you're making $30 million guaranteed, I don't care what I look like. You know what I'm saying? I could be playing football with flip-flops on as long as I'm getting paid money, guaranteeing money in a sport in which, you know, your life is at risk pretty much on a day-to-day basis. You know, all these residual problems that football players have. Antonio Brown has been knocked out at least twice by the same guy that played at ASU, mind you. But he got knocked out at least twice, which is, you know, detrimental head trauma that he will have to deal with later on in life. But another question that pops up, and I was talking to my girl about this earlier, was that did he really lose, though? Because shortly after he was cut or released by Oakland, he got picked up by the Patriots. And, you know, he got a $15 million. They say he can make up to $15 million over the one-year deal, $9 million signing bonus. I mean, I don't know. I don't think the Oakland Raiders have a chance of going to the Super Bowl at all in the next 3 years, which would have been Antonio Brown's contract. But the Patriots do. It seemed like they win the Super Bowl almost every year, at least every other year. And he'll be able to play with Tom Brady. He will go down in history, you know, playing with one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play football and win the Super Bowl, and he could make about $15 million this year. And then if he does well, they can sign. They're forced to sign him on another contract. They could sign him on an even bigger contract than Oakland Raiders. But the key to what I'm thinking in this situation is that I don't like his character. I don't like the selfishness. You know, I believe in being a servant. You know, I believe in being selfless. And that mentality and that aspect of life will cause you to go further and, you know, when you look at the long term than in the short term goals that you would think somebody like Antonio Brown has. What player wants to really play with you if you are willing to sacrifice the whole season? You know, he was a key component to the Oakland Raiders. You're going to sacrifice the entire season because you're pouting about something that's an individual thing. And it's not that the helmet was unsafe. It's that he didn't like the way it looked. And mind you, the NFL is not going to take that loss and get sued when Antonio Brown gets knocked unconscious and they say, well, that was a defective helmet and we upgraded the helmet and you decided to wear that one and we let you. I mean, Antonio Brown is probably going to make $100 million if something were to happen to him as it relates to, you know, the helmet issue. But this, to me, speaks to a bigger issue of personality and integrity within the sports arena. When you play football, when you play athletic sport and you make it to the professional level, you get paid a lot of money for what you do. You know, I hear a lot of people talk about the military should get paid more than the NFL. Well, when you talk about the risk factor, I would think if you could make that argument, yeah, they would get paid more. But there's not a lot of excitement, you know, in watching somebody go out on a battlefield. There's a lot of excitement in apparel being sold and personalities in these professional leagues. But it doesn't require you to have excellent character. And I'm afraid that this will really start to affect younger athletes who want to play in the NFL. Mind you, if you're watching, you're a young athlete, I don't want to hurt your dreams right now, but there's a good possibility that you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. It's a good possibility. Some, not all, a very select few, and it's not just talent. You can have all the talent in the world. I was a very talented athlete. I ran a 4.3 in the 40, 44-inch vertical leap. For some of y'all who know anything about football, I mean, I was what they would call a freak athlete. But circumstances and situations can lead you down a path where the NFL won't be the final step. And I want young people to understand that football should be your backup plan. What is Antonio Brown going to do afterwards, after football is over, if he's spent all his money? Obviously, we know that over 80% of the players in the league go bankrupt. So if he goes bankrupt. He has no moral character, or he haven't built up a moral character beyond being a selfish person. What are you going to do after that? Think about this for a minute. You make millions of dollars, and then you go to a job that's going to pay you probably $21 an hour. If you cannot sustain your character in that arena, making millions, it's going to be very difficult for you to do that when you're making, I wouldn't say minimum wage, but you're not making as much money. So I would love to know and for you guys to ponder in your mind. I want to know what you guys think about it. Eventually, I'll have a chance to have y'all call in, but I don't want to do that just yet, because to be honest, I don't want somebody to drop the F-bomb and all that on the show while I'm just getting started. So eventually I'll bring y'all on, but I wonder what the thoughts are surrounding that. Obviously you can shoot me messages on my social media, but I think Antonio Brown, is not making a long-term positive decision, but I still think he's making a lot of money just to play a sport. And I really don't have a problem with that. Another aspect that has come up in relation to getting paid money and playing sports, and it's something that I really want to address too, is the concept of paying college football players these crazy amounts of money, similar to what you're paying NFL players. And as a former college football player, I just really don't think it's a good idea for these colleges to pay out. I don't know what they expect, hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars to college players. The alternative to that, in my opinion, is to pay to get them more education, to pay to set them up for a better future. So if you're playing for 4 years in college football, instead of them cutting you a check every month, because I'm going to be honest, I blew my money when I was in college, and so did all my other teammates. I got the Pell Grant, and it was, at the time, it was a lot of money. And I bought rims for my car, buying clothes, going out to eat. When you're young, you're not going to do well with that money. And they're pretty much throwing money down the drain. But what they can do is say, if you want to be successful, you want to do well in school, you make good grades, we'll pay for you to get your master's degree. If you want to continue your education, we'll pay for you to get your doctorate degree. The colleges and universities can pay and use that money effectively. And if you decide not to go to school, maybe they can put money aside in a certain fund that you can access later in life, instead of, again, setting you up for failure like we see happening so many times in the NFL. And I definitely think that's an issue that we can address and have conscious conversations about. And so let me get back to another thing I was talking about earlier. I gave my story, and then I jumped to Antonio Brown because I just that story has been fuming in my mind all day long. But I want to just clarify or just add to a little bit about my background to continue that, and then we'll go to something different in the next segment. But for those of you who were listening in the first segment, I got to go. So I love y'all, man. I'm going to get the hang of this thing. Y'all bear with me. Make sure you have your seatbelt on if you're in the car. We're going to go to the next segment. You're watching the Brandon Tatum Show on KTAR 92.3.
Brandon Tatum, KTAR News, 92.3 FM.
I don't know about you, but that song get me hyped, man. But let's talk about law enforcement. I was a police officer. Obviously, I said in the first segment, I was a police officer with Tucson Police Department, and I'm generally in favor of police officers because I have the insight on what goes on. I've been through academy. I know what it's like to be in a life and death situation multiple times. I know what it's like when people are combative and they're lying to you every day. So I get it, right? I get it. I understand. But when an officer does something wrong, I think I also understand that there's a necessity or there's a obligation on my end to bring attention to it and call them out, and not necessarily to just damage the person's character unless they're a total, what, but to give a little insight on how this went wrong and what can we do to improve. And that brings me to a story that I've heard on the radio going around, and now I have an opportunity to talk about it. A Glendale police officer that resigned after tasing a guy, I don't know how many times, and beating him in the head with the taser. When this story came to my attention, initially I'm like, okay, they always got something to say about police officers. And I heard somebody, in my opinion, was being an SJW, and they just continue to rip this officer. And I said, you know what? Let me look at the video. Let me do a little bit of research myself, and I'll make a determination of what I think about it. And this officer, Officer Carroll, and I forget his first name. I'll get it in a minute. But Officer Carroll, who works for the Glendale Police Department, resigned. I heard that he had other issues with the police department, but that's nor here nor there. When I look at what happened at this incident, it was troubling to me. It was embarrassing. And I believe there's 2 points to look at when you are examining the issues and how this particular incident went wrong. Initially, he was pulled over, or the police stopped behind him in reference to, I guess, believing he was drunk. He fell asleep in his car. As soon as he gets to the window, it is clear that something is wrong. Me looking at the body worn camera, it's like he's high on drugs. He's a drug addict. That's it. That's what I saw when the officer's body cam initially turned on, and he looked like a tweaker, and he's lethargic. He's non-responsive, and this officer, I guess, felt like he was being challenged, or he was on the same level as this guy, which I think is detrimental when you're trying to make an arrest and you're trying to be a good police officer, for lack of better terms. You have the mental upper hand, right? This person is lethargic, having some mental issues, and so you have to take charge as a police officer, and you have to be able to dictate and navigate this person's mind for them, right? And so when you get to the car, you understand that this guy is, saying, I don't want to get out the car. Listen, there's no rush. You have your police car parked behind the guy. He's not going to bail out of it. He doesn't even seem like he's capable of even driving the car. And if you need to use force, this is what I learned in the academy. If you need to use force, it is appropriate and legitimate to use force until it doesn't work, and then you have to do something else, right? It's the same thing happened with Rodney King, right? If anybody know the story of Rodney King, and some people are going to get mad at me for saying this, but, based on what he did initially, almost beat an officer to death, took him on a high-speed chase, him getting his butt kicked initially seemed a bit reasonable. He was resisting arrest. But once you hit him with the baton and it doesn't work, if you continue to just beat the man, it's gonna look horrible. And I think those officers obviously should be arrested. It was excessive force, but this officer is kind of battling the same thing. The guy's being, combative, but kind of passive aggressive. You pull him out of the car. You're clearly stronger than him. You clearly have more training and physical ability over his. You get him on the ground. He don't put his hands behind his back. He don't have any guns. What's the rush? Call for backup. Let him lay there. Sit on top of him. Let him lay there. Obviously not suffocate the guy, but you can still use your tactics. And for police officers, you know what I'm talking about. Use your tactics. And if you tase him, which would be appropriate in this situation if he's combative, because you don't know, he could be on meth or something upper that'll make him have superhuman strength. But once you tase him and it doesn't work, and even if you decide to strike him with it, and if it's not working, then you need to transition to another use of force. And another thing, there's the overuse of the taser that I've been seeing. And I never used a taser. I didn't even wear a taser the second half of my career, and I was a SWAT operator. I didn't use the taser, and I guess I applied it one time with a guy who was butt naked, running around a community, knocking on somebody's door. I guess he thought he was going to somebody's house. This dude was naked, and I'm like, it's something wrong with him. I don't even want to touch this guy. So I'll threaten them with the use of force, and more than likely they will comply. And yes, he did. He complied, and they had to arrest him. He was naked. It was nasty. But I'll say that for another segment. But anyway, with cops that I'm seeing nowadays, I mean, goodness gracious, somebody running away from you and you tase them in the back. I mean, what happened to you running the person down and using hand-to-hand, restraint or combat? And in this situation, use your hands, dude. They teach us how to do these tactics in the academy. Use your pressure points. If you are too afraid to go hands-on with somebody, you probably need to retire. You probably need to turn in the badge because – and I don't know what training Glendale has, and I believe that they have excellent training. I'm going to default to excellent training because our SWAT team and Glendale SWAT team did a tactical event at a stadium together, and they had really good tactics. They were real polished SWAT team. But I don't know what they're teaching this guy. He resigned, obviously, which I think was a appropriate thing to do. The question then comes up: what about his pension? If the department allows him to do something that's egregious and he resigns, he still have an ability to access his pension, work for another police agency. Versus if they fired him, and he would have a lot of complications surrounding that. Do I think it rose to the occasion of firing this guy? I don't know. It would have to determine or depend on the things that he's done in the past. If this is a residual, this guy has been acting up for a long period of time, he has to go. There's no question about it. They need to fire this guy. He's ruining the reputation of the entire police department. But if this is a one-off, there's a level of discipline and training that you can do that you won't, destroy the man's livelihood. But I'm glad he resigned, man, because this is a black eye on law enforcement in America, and we all know that there is an attack on police in America, and not even by the public alone, not just by the public, but by police chiefs. And y'all know how I feel. I was on the Mac and Gato show a few times talking about Jerry Williams from the Phoenix Police Department, whom I believe she should turn a badge in. If you ask me, I would love to have her come and explain to my audience why she make the decisions that she's made, why waste hundreds of thousands of dollars doing some research on why police use of force is increasing. I could have told her that it comes with what the public is doing. It doesn't necessarily mean that police are being more aggressive when people are pulling guns on police more. I mean, how's that the police officers' fault that people are going crazy in the city? And I think that, and I said this before, and I'm gonna say it again: the city council and the structure of municipal police departments are the fall of law enforcement in America. And this is why a police chief could come up through the ranks as a polished police officer and understand the job, right? But when they get promoted all the way to the top, they lose all kind of authority. They lose all kinds of abilities to actually do their job. Not all, but some. And then they lead police down a slippery slope because it satisfies the public and satisfies the city council, which I think is absolutely asinine. When you are a police chief, your obligation is to fulfill the necessity to protect your officers. At the moment in which you do not do that, you have failed. You have failed, and I have nothing else to say about that. You're listening to the Brandon Tatum Show on KTAR. Y'all make sure y'all come back. We're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about the big, bad President Trump. Y'all know I love Trump. We're going to talk about him after the break. Stay tuned. I'll see you on the other side.
This is the Brandon Tatum Show. The Brandon Tatum Show on KTAR News 92.3 FM and the KTAR News app.
If you're still listening, that means you really love me, and I appreciate it. So if you're listening and you've liked what you heard so far, obviously we're going to talk about the president here in this last segment. But I want to remind you guys to follow me on social media. I didn't even say that, but follow me on Theofficertatum is all my social media platforms. I do post videos on YouTube and post videos on theofficertatumstore.com. We have merch there too. So, but anyway, let's get into this. Donald J. Trump, right? This is probably the most, I don't know, infamous and famous person at the same time in the United States of America and around the world, mind you. Donald Trump has pretty popular around the world. I almost would assume that people outside of the country, not including his supporters, but people outside of the country probably like him a little more than the people who dislike him in America for sure, or who are American citizens here for sure. So let's talk about this for a minute. I think that this is the pivotal point where people make decisions whether they like you or hate you is dependent on if you support the president or not. And I think without fail or without any apologies, I voted for President Donald Trump. And I'm not ashamed to say I did. And now I almost feel like that supporting the president is kind of the new concept of coming out of the closet as a gay American. Like, people are literally hiding this from family members. Because as soon as you say you voted for the president, now they don't want to talk to you. They don't want you coming over to family events. You'll get ostracized on your job. I mean, you name it. That's almost the same concept. People are closeted supporters, and they're just waiting strategically to announce that they actually support the president. And I'll say this: if you don't believe me, all you have to do is look at votes. All you have to do is look at the fact that it was 62 million people that voted, or over 62 million people that voted for President Trump. If you look at the media, it seems like everybody's against him, but 62 million people, that's a lot of people voting. And I don't think it feels that way when you walk around in the public sphere. But this is what I will say. Two things. Number one, people talk about the president and they say he's a racist and all this stuff. I think that's total BS. If the man was a racist, I would not vote for him. I would not support anything that he does. I wouldn't even utter his name. But the man is not a racist. When people say that, it really diminishes the actual racists who are out there. There's people out here who really hate me because of the color of my skin. They really hate me. They want to do harm to me. The president has invited me to the White House 3 times already, and I'm going for a 4th time in October. That doesn't seem very racist to me. The president has literally created an environment where the unemployment for African Americans in this country and all other minorities at a historic low. It has never been this low in history. And in Americans in general, of all nationalities and backgrounds, however they classified, and at the end of the day, we're all Americans and we're all humans. We are one human race. But the way they classify it, the rest of America is still decades low unemployment. I mean, look at the First Step Act. Some people, and I go and talk to people about this all the time. Mr. Racist President, the First Step Act. If you don't know about it, you might want to Google it at least. Might want to look it up. Maybe want to read. It took me like 3 or 4 hours to read the entire document of the First Step Act. But literally changing legislation that will release people that have been bound by policies, by people that I would argue could be classified as real racist. I think when you go into a Ku Klux Klan member's funeral and you support him and say he was a mentor to you, that to me sounds kind of racist. And that sounds like Hillary Clinton to me. But, hey, let's stick to Trump for now. So when you look at those components and you look at what he's done with the First Step Act, the Urban Revitalization Coalition, I've talked to people in the White House that are involved in that. They're literally revolutionizing minority communities all over the country. That to me is not very racist. Back in the day, they used to hang people from trees. That's racism. Back in the day, you couldn't drink out of the same water fountain. And for those of you who don't know, my girlfriend is white. Me and her couldn't even get married back in the day. That's racism. We couldn't go to the same, we couldn't eat at the same restaurants. Black folks had to sit in the back of a bus, pay the same fare, sit in the back. We went to the Black Museum a few weeks ago, and you look at the history, and you're like, this is real racism, ladies and gentlemen. What the president is doing is just people just disagree with policies. They just disagree with how he's rolling it out. The president don't dislike Mexican people. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. The president, like many other Americans and like people on the other side, if you look at their rhetoric before, just don't like the way people are coming into our country illegally. We accept over 1 million immigrants every year. Nobody has a problem with that. Some people probably do have a problem with immigration. They feel like the Americans deserve to have some of these opportunities, but that's not the argument that I'm making or the president is making. It's that we want people to come here the right way. We want people to feel safe when they come here. We want people to have opportunities when they get here. We want them to be able to have access to America the way they should when they come here, not be smuggled in by a coyote that will leave you in the desert if you can't keep up, that will probably do something nefarious to you sexually, that'll probably, take you and force you into human or sex trafficking. We don't want that for people. And then when you get here, you got to fly under the radar because you don't have a Social Security number. You can't work on a job, and people can take advantage of you. Immigration, the immigration attorneys take advantage of some of these people, not all, but some. We don't want that for you. We don't want you to have to trek hundreds of miles to come into America only to drown because the cartel pushes you. Because the coyotes push you in the water so they can flee to safety. That has happened, ladies and gentlemen. We want you to have access to the American dream like everybody else. And that includes immigration reform. That includes building a wall to keep out people and drugs who shouldn't be here, who are going to cause harm to people in this country. That's simple and plain. And I believe that when we talk about DACA, when we talk about things like that, President Trump has consistently attempted to work on the other side to get DACA recipients a path to citizenship. But because he want to do that and build a wall, people don't, politically, people don't want to agree with him. But I just thought I'd throw that out there. I would encourage people, if you disagree with what I think about the president, you disagree with me being a conservative, that you would at least listen. Eventually we're going to let you call in, and I'll let the naysayers call in, and we'll hear from them first. But at least listen and hear. And if you have a disagreement or something that I said that you disagree with, you don't like, if it's not factual, call me out for it. But other than that, it is invaluable for you to hear another side. Because if you stay one-sided your whole life, you're not going to be very informed politically. And you may not make proper political decisions. How do I know? Because I used to be on the other side. I used to be voting Democrat, and I believed that I was a Democrat. My parents were Democrats. And I'm not a big proponent on telling you how to vote because I really don't care. But you need to vote for what's best for you and your family and what you really, truly believe can really help this country. There's no reason for you to vote party line. There's no reason for you to vote because your mama said so. And I had to learn that. I could say slightly the hard way, but I learned a lesson. I opened my eyes. When President Barack Obama was the president, which I voted for him in second term, I thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. But when he started to down police officers and talk crazy about them and literally put my life in danger on the job, I said, man, I got to look somewhere else. And I encourage every single person to do that. If you haven't learned nothing else, have an open mind, take constructive criticism, and I want y'all to have a blessed day. Eventually, I'll do my little prayer at the end, but we're running out of time. But thank y'all for watching, man. Again, follow me on the social media. Make sure you come back next weekend on Saturday at 6 p.m. to hear the truth on the Brandon Tatum Show on KTAR. I love y'all. Have a good weekend.